Okay, well, I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight. It's Whitney L. And I met Whitney over 6 years ago now, right? Almost seven. Oh my gosh. And it's just been a gift to watch her walk through life and to God work in her life. And I was truly honored to spend knee to knee reading through the book and going through the steps. And if you're in the program and you're working with your sponsor and you think you're going to bug your sponsor or bug somebody, or I don't want to take up too much of her time, it's because I was working with an alcoholic that I had a spiritual awakening, and it was Whitney that I was working with. And it's just, she's so close to my heart because of that. And if God hadn't have put her in my life, I don't know if I would have had that experience. So I'm going to let her tell her story. Whitney?
Okay, gosh. As this day was approaching, I was getting more and more nervous, and I think trying to calm my nerves, I said to my sponsor, it's my own story. I can't really mess it up, right? She's like, well, I mean, you could go up there and just go brain dead. So, thanks, Carrie. Thanks for that. So here's to not going brain dead. My name is Whitney. I'm an alcoholic. And before I forget, there's a few important things that I want to mention. I do have a sponsor, and she knows she's my sponsor a majority of the time, right? I think. I have the privilege of taking other women through these steps, and I have a home group, which is here at Cypresswood. And those things, coupled with working the steps and practicing these principles in my daily life, and a lot of grace from a higher power that I call God. I haven't had to take a drink since October 11th, 2017. And I'm as grateful as I know how to be for that. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Southern California, and I grew up with a wonderful family, and I had a great childhood. I know there's a lot of stories of dysfunctional families and dysfunction in the homes growing up, and that's not my story. I was the dysfunction of my family. Looking at it, I was the dysfunction, and there's nothing that I can point to or identify and say, that's it. That's why I'm an alcoholic. That's what made me an alcoholic. Nothing. I was afforded every opportunity. I had two loving parents, supportive, stable, not alcoholic. I have a younger brother, also non-alcoholic. That was all me. And that isn't my story. Looking back at my childhood, though, there are a few things that stand out now that may have been kind of a precursor, abnormal qualities that I can identify. One being this idea that everything and everyone had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Perfectionism to, the 10th degree. And that's still something to this day that I really have to keep an eye on and do a lot of work on, because I will set unrealistically high expectations on myself and, anyone in my life. And, that can just, all that does is it just leads me, sets me up for disappointment, resentment. It's something I gotta watch. But that was a theme throughout my life, and I don't know where it started. No one ever told me I had to be perfect, but it was just this, it was part of me. The other thing, they say it's a disease of more, and again, from a really young age, I identify with that of, it was never enough. You could never love me enough, you could never give me enough, I never had enough. I was never enough, you were never enough, more. And again, something that has followed me, throughout my life of trying to obtain more and fill this void with material things, emotional things, whatever it is, but just it not being enough, needing to be more. And the last thing, in our book, it says, more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. And man, I identify with that. Because again, from a really young age, it's like these two, I don't know if it was an ego thing or a people-pleasing thing, but like there was always these different versions of myself. And it seems like, within those different versions, there was always like this good girl persona versus like this badass bad girl. And I always kind of, was between those two. And I had a different wardrobe. I had a different verbiage, a different boyfriend that all matched whatever persona, whatever stage character I was presenting. And, it was like I was the president of the entire elementary school and, straight A student. And then as soon as the teacher would turn her back, I'm defacing school property. I'm, this serious athlete, played soccer my whole life, and I'm going and getting drunk and getting high before games that I know college recruiters are coming to watch me play at. So it's just always this kind of like, these, just didn't make sense, these different versions, but that's something I remember reading and saying, wow, that's me. I have all these different stage characters that I want to present. I don't want to go too far into my drunk-a-log because I think if you're an alcoholic like I am, all of our stories are very similar. Details may be different, but the restlessness, the irritability, the discomfort that you feel, and that taking a drink takes that away, and the ease and the comfort that come with that first drink. If you're an alcoholic like me, you know that first drink is almost always followed by a second and a third, and so on and so forth. And if you're here tonight in this room, chances are you also know that at some point along that ride, alcohol stopped working. And when alcohol stops working for an alcoholic, a lot of darkness follows. A lot of pain, a lot of loneliness, consequences, all of those things follow. And that's my story too. I think it is important to go into a little bit just so we can identify with each other. So I'll tell you a quick story of my first drunk experience. And I think I was maybe 13, and all my best girlfriends, they had already gotten drunk prior. I was away out of town at a soccer tournament, and I didn't want to miss out, and I wanted that same experience, and so it was everyone's mission of the day to get Whitney drunk. No one else was drinking, but Whitney was drinking. So, we took an empty water bottle and we broke into the liquor cabinet, and anything that was unsealed went into the water bottle. So, we're talking Jack Daniels and vodka and like margarita mix and anything else that we got our hands on. And it was, pretty gross. But I remember taking that first sip and just like, chills, going all over my body and, just awful. And then, I'm determined to take that second sip and had to really hold down the urge to projectile vomit because that would come later in the evening. And but on that third pull, something happened. And I this warmth came over me, and it was magic. Like for the first time ever, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was right where my feet were, and I wasn't worried about past, and I wasn't overthinking the future, and everything was good. It was right, it was perfect, it was enough. And I spent years and years and years after that searching for that same feeling. And the rest of the night was just as magical. I peed all over the kitchen floor, stripped naked, got locked outside in the front yard, broad daylight, by the way. Fell into some rose bushes, bleeding all over my back. They threw me into a bathtub, and I think around that time the projectile vomiting started, and and lasted for hours. And I was so sick. A lot of that story was relayed back to me. I don't know if I was a blackout drinker from day one, maybe like a brownout drinker. It was spotty. They told me, I remember when they told me, but it was fuzzy for sure. And but I knew one thing. I knew that I wanted to feel that again. And I knew that as soon as I had a chance to, I was going to take it. You know, in high school, I remember the first high school party I went to. I got blackout drunk, and I ended up passed out in someone's backyard, waking up with a bunch of senior boys' names spray painted all over my body. And how terrifying, you know? But I didn't feel terrified. I didn't feel scared, or I felt like I arrived. Cool. And that next Monday at school, I'm walking down the halls, and these cute seniors are waving at me and saying hi to me and know who I am. And it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. I can do this. I've arrived. And for a long time it was fun. All throughout high school, it was a party. It was a good time. My drinking continued to progress. I think I heard it in one of these meetings called party favors or side dishes. And that's part of my story, but that isn't my story. It was always alcohol. It always accompanied alcohol. But that disease of more was always prevalent. No matter what it was that I was taking or doing, I wanted more of it. I always did the most of it. I didn't drink like my friends drank. And I recognized that then. Didn't seem like a big deal then, but I do recognize that difference. Moving on, into first couple of years of college, I still was living at home. I went to a community college, and again, in a household where no one else drinks, and that wasn't really acceptable. I had to control it. It stayed at bay. There were some consequences that started around that time. In California, it's called a DUI, DWI here, but I got one of those before I was even of legal drinking age. I think I was 19. I was taking the Metro bus everywhere, for the next year. And that was my first experience with AA. I was court mandated to go to AA meetings. I won't lie, nothing stuck. I mean, I was texting, making plans to go out, to the bar with my fake ID after the meeting. I was not worried about what y'all had to say, and it, nothing. But one thing did get in, that there was a place to go where people could stop drinking. I knew that. I remember joking with my best friend's mom, saying, "Oh, you'll see me in AA when I'm 30." Well, joke's on me because it was when I was 22. But anyways, so a few consequences started, but nothing major. I remember when I got that DUI, not being fazed at all because I drank and drove so frequently that it was almost just kind of like, well, what did I expect? Like, I knew this was going to happen at some point. But it wasn't until I moved out from my parents' house and I moved to Houston. I moved to Houston on a soccer scholarship. I played D1 soccer at the University of Houston. But that's really when my drinking took off and went to the next level. And especially after my senior year, once soccer was over, there was really nothing holding me back at that point. I could, for the first time, drink the way I wanted to drink, not worry about controlling it, not worry about, anyone watching what I'm doing. And it took off pretty quickly at that point. I remember driving to one of my finals, and it was early in the morning. At that point, I was a daily drinker pretty quickly, and at that point, I was drinking every day. Usually, I was drinking in the mornings also. I lied to myself and said I just hated the feeling of being hungover, which I did, don't get me wrong. But I couldn't stand the feeling of being hungover, so I would drink in the morning to get rid of that hangover. What I didn't realize is once I put that alcohol in my body, it didn't just stop, with that first drink to make me feel better. It continued. But that morning, I wasn't able to drink before I went to class. I woke up too late or whatever. I didn't have it at the house. And I remember I drove to the final, took the final, and was driving home, shaky, so sick, and, pulling over, stopping at a gas station, and grabbing those little, bottles of wine, downing a couple of those before I, turned back on my car, lighting up a cigarette, driving back home, throwing up into the paper bag that the wine bottles came in, relighting my cigarette, cracking another wine bottle, and continuing on my way. And I think looking at that, in that moment, I knew that wasn't right. I knew like something was going wrong. I just chose not to look too closely at it. And it wasn't until an ex-boyfriend, this is a guy I'd been on and off with for many years. It was a very, physically, mentally, emotionally abusive relationship that I was in and had been in. He got sober. We'd lost touch for a while, and he apparently got sober back in California, reached out to me, wanted to reconnect and make his amends, which I think he probably did. But anyways, I remember at that point thinking, he's going to come stay with me for a couple of days. It'd be pretty messed up to be, drinking or using in front of him. So I'm not going to do that for a few days. And I drank on the way to pick him up from the airport. And I said, okay, that's it for the next few days. Picked him up. And I remember, day 2 of that, just feeling horrible and thinking to myself, like, am I having physical withdrawal symptoms? Like, am I old enough for that to be happening? Have I been drinking long enough for that to be happening? And feeling a little bit freaked out by that. And while he was here, he wanted to, go to an AA meeting. So I went with him. And it was during that meeting that I don't know what was said. I don't know what I heard. But I started sobbing. And something struck me. And I identified with something in that meeting and said, okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I think I have a problem. And I think this can help me. And he, went back home, whatever. And I continued to go to meetings. I found a sponsor, and I, managed to put some months together. I think, maybe 4 or 5 months. I wasn't ready at that point yet. And eventually I did, go back out and continue drinking and picked up right where I left off. And again, it was this vicious cycle of waking up hungover, feeling like shit, putting a little bit of vodka in the orange juice or, drinking a hard cider or whatever. And again, that idea of perfectionism still was playing a very large role. So the outside was put together. I kept a job. I looked put together. I had a car. I had the apartment. I had nice things. I didn't want anyone, and I worked double, triple hard, at my job or whatever I was doing so that no one could see that I was a little bit drunk. And gosh, now I don't know how. They must have known because I can smell alcohol from like a mile away, And they had to have smelled it. But regardless, that cycle was, I would wake up, I would drink enough to make me feel better, enough to kick that allergy into gear, but not so much that I couldn't function. And I would still do what I needed to do throughout the day, but as soon as I got home, it was, drinking to black out. And it got pretty lonely at that point, I really bothered me that I drove while drinking and drove while I was drunk. I knew that some serious things could happen by doing that. So I tried to minimize that by drinking alone and drinking at home. And, I still would end up, going to a gas station but at least they were short drives. But yeah, I couldn't get off of that cycle. And, but I'd had a taste of sobriety and I knew what that felt like and I wanted that back. And I remember crying to God and like wanting so badly to reach out to that old sponsor or having this like innate sense of if I can get to a meeting, I can get sober again. If I can get myself to an AA meeting, I'll be sober again. I was too embarrassed to come here drunk, and I could not put 24 hours together without drinking. So it took, 5-6 months before I finally did make my way back here. And I did. I finally got back, and I was serious about it. And I wasn't here because of ex-boyfriend. I wasn't here because of the court. I was here because I wanted sobriety. And I worked the steps. I got a sponsor. And I did the deal, and I reaped the benefits of it. And during that time, I met an amazing guy who's now my husband. I was advancing in this career that I was putting a lot of time, a lot of energy towards, and life was really good. It says in our book, on page 30, in the doctors are more about alcoholism. The idea that somehow, someday, he'll control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. And I'd read that sentence, those few sentences, several times. And I don't think I understood the gravity of it. But, that idea that I could somehow control it came back. And it came back because the frequency that I was going to meetings, started to grow. I stopped reaching out to my sponsors much. I wasn't active in sponsoring anyone else. And, that idea just kept creeping back of like, you're too young, or, your story doesn't sound like everyone else's story, or you didn't really try that hard to control it, you could have tried harder. And, these lies we tell ourselves until the point where, my husband, he'd never seen me drunk before. I don't think he understood. So like to him, it was like, oh yeah, it's not that big of a deal. And so, I made the decision, I'm going to go drink. I'm going to have a glass of wine with dinner, and it's not going to be a big deal. And I did have a glass of wine, and I had a second glass of wine, and I think we ended up, buying booze somewhere, or champagne or something, and getting, nice and drunk. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, but I'm going to control it, though. This is the first, I'm going with a hurrah, but after that, I'm going to control it. And I tried to control it, and there was times when I could control it, and I held on to those really tight and used those as an example of like, yep, that night I went out and I only had 3 drinks, and I didn't keep drinking when I got home, and I got this thing. But more times than not, if I was controlling it, I sure as heck wasn't enjoying it. And if I drank to enjoy it, control was not happening. I also remember the insanity and the obsession part, and being able to recognize that. I remember driving to work. It was a very short drive from my apartment to work, and my brain just going like a million miles per hour of, okay, if I don't drink today, I can drink tomorrow, and I can have 2 drinks, and then I won't drink on Saturday, but then I can go to brunch on Sunday, have a drink on Sunday, and then Monday through Wednesday I won't drink again. Thursday, we'll see. And it's just like, oh, that's exhausting. It's exhausting to think that way. And I remember thinking that and just saying it was a lot easier when alcohol was just not on the table and not part of the equation. Fast forward a little bit, I don't remember exactly how long I was drinking. It wasn't a super long time, but it was, after a shift at work, and I drove to a little Mexican spot right by where I was working, also at a restaurant, but and took some work with me to drink and work, at that place. And I remember the first 2 margaritas, and they were the big ones with the floaters, and probably the Everclear, not real high class margaritas, but kind of give you a real nasty hangover. And that's kind of all I remember. What I know happened is I drove back to my place of work to drop off whatever paperwork I was working on. Again, my boyfriend, now husband at the time, he was working a shift there. He intercepted me and quickly identified how shit-faced I was, excuse my language, and called me an Uber and said, I'm taking your keys, there's no way you're driving home. And then in this Uber ride, I passed out, was unresponsive, and was throwing up everywhere, basically. Thank God for this Uber driver who I've tried to find. I still have not been able to this day, to make an amends or pay a cleaning fee or anything like that. But I owe him. He dragged my essentially lifeless body up the stairs of my apartment, called my boyfriend, said, I don't know what to do. Is she on anything? Is she okay? Like, she's not answering. She's not responsive. She's really sick. He immediately left work, sped home, and I think the paramedics were called at that point. I don't remember if he got to me first or the paramedics got to me. I don't remember any of that. I remember one part of it, and I remember paramedics over my body saying, oh, she probably weighs 120 pounds, trying to get the information. I remember my head thinking, you asshole, I'm 115 pounds. Don't put 5 extra pounds on me. That is all I remember. Sick. But anyways, I woke up in a hospital bed, and it also says in our book that idea has to be smashed, that we can one day, enjoy alcohol like a normal man. It was smashed for me. I woke up and I knew, and it's like, okay, well, whether I'm an alcoholic or not, I don't need to get caught up in the semantics. I cannot drink safely. I cannot put alcohol in my body. Something crazy happens, and because the doctor was asking, and they ran all my blood work and everything, and the alcohol level was like, obviously extremely high enough for alcohol poisoning and everything that had happened. But they were asking if I was on drugs or if I was, taking medication. It's like, no, and I wasn't. My body just does not do well with alcohol, whatever you want to call it. Today, I know it's alcoholism because all the other parts of the ism I identify with. But at that point, I just knew I couldn't drink anymore, and luckily I knew where to come. And I came to these rooms, and I was serious again, and that idea was smashed for me. And I knew what that voice was in the back of my head that told me that I didn't have this disease. I could recognize it, I could hear it. And I knew how to keep that voice away, which is by coming to meetings and by working the steps and service work and giving back and all of those things. And I want to spend, the next part of this hour telling you what my life is like with this program, and why I'm so grateful. Because when I came in here and I heard people say, "Oh, I'm a grateful alcoholic," I thought you were full of it. And I'm so grateful today. And y'all don't owe me anything, but I owe you everything. I owe you everything I have today. And while I didn't lose, a tremendous amount, I would have, and I would have never received the things that I have today. During sobriety, I purchased a home. I got married to a normie. He's a non-alcoholic, but today he understands as much as he needs to understand, and he supports. If he goes out and drinks a beer, I can smell it a mile away, but it doesn't bother me, and he rarely does it. And, we really don't keep alcohol in the house, and it's a non-factor in either of our lives, to be honest. What else did I do in sobriety? I got my dream job, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I lost my dream job. I had a baby. I've experienced highs and lows, and meaningful relationships and friendships that I never was able to form while I was drinking. God has shown up in my life in so many ways, and I came in here not with any prejudice against God or against religion or anything like that. I just didn't have a relationship. I didn't have a higher power working in my life, and I saw it work in y'all's lives, and I heard the stories and the testimonies that you told, and I believed you. I just didn't have that for myself, and I didn't know if I could have that for myself or what that would look like. And I want to tell one specific story of I've had a lot of spiritual experiences. I think more so of the learned variety, but this one just is a great example of God showing up really big. So I talked about that dream job that I worked really hard for in the restaurant industry, and just grinded for 7-8 years on the track to become a general manager of a well-known restaurant company. And with this restaurant company, it's pretty prestigious. Not a lot of spots open up, and it's pretty cutthroat, pretty competitive. And I finally got it. And I was working 70, 80 hours a week on average. Blood, sweat, and tears. Revamping this restaurant, had a lot of issues with staffing and attitudes and just everything. But I poured myself into it. My husband does the same thing, so he was very supportive, and he understood that. And he was my biggest cheerleader in all of that. And while it was really hard work, I loved it. I loved it, and I created a family there, and I was very proud of what I was doing, and it was a major part of my identity. During that time, I had hired a few people that were in the program, so they said. And And I felt good about that. I was talking AA to them during their interviews, and they were talking about working an active program, and no issue. I hired 4 or 5 of them, and great employees too. Did a great job. It came out, one of them was actually doing so well that we wanted to advance him and put him up for a catering position, and they do background checks for catering. We don't do background checks for just the regular, cook, but if you go into people's homes, we do a background check. And some pretty horrific things came back, and he was living at a halfway house, which was disclosed to me, but when I heard halfway house, and we were talking AA program, shame on me for assuming, but I assumed it was a halfway house for drugs and alcohol, and it was not. It was for sex offenders, and all these guys were coming from the same place, and so I had, 6 or 7 registered sex offenders with some pretty hardcore charges on them working at this restaurant. I think the company freaked out. Nothing like this had ever really happened before. HR uses the advisory, and I remember driving to, I was off that day and being told to come in and we needed to talk. And as soon as I found this out, I was very upfront, I told my boss and my boss's boss exactly what was going on, and I didn't try to hide anything. And I remember I called my sponsor on the way, and I said, I think that I'm going to lose my job. And I was so scared. And she said, well, sweetie, all you can do is, just bring God into it. God's got you. And I walked in there, and essentially that I was demoted. I was offered a position to be an assistant general manager at a different location, and they kept the pay, pretty much the same. So it wasn't really a pay cut, but man, all of the effort, all of the relationships, everything I poured into that place was gone. And I remember walking back to my car and just feeling this deep heartbreak. I was heartbroken. But I also had this sense of God, and there's no other way to say it. It's just like, I don't understand this. I don't know why this is happening. They could have handled this so many different ways, but I wasn't angry and I wasn't resentful, which is totally not my MO. Before this program, it would have been blame, hate, anger, rage, and it was just this immediate level of acceptance and trust in God. And I know where it came from. It came from y'all, and it came from this program. It didn't make it hurt any less. I was still, very heartbroken, and I took a couple days to decide if I would accept this new position, which I did. And I think within a few days of me working at the new restaurant, I found out I was pregnant. And to be honest, with the way that I was working and not taking care of myself physically, I was going 15, 16-hour work days, not eating, just going. And I don't know that I would have had a successful, healthy pregnancy doing that the way I was doing it. And I sure as hell wouldn't have the time to be the mom that I am today doing that. And so here I am, working this job with a lot less responsibility, still kind of being paid and compensated the same. And by the time I was 6 months pregnant, they reapproached me and said, hey, we have another GM position opening up, and we know that you learned from that last experience, and we don't hold that against you, and we want to offer you this position. And I prayed on it, and I said, you know what, I thank you so much. I don't think, I would be able to put in the same level of, attention and time and that it takes to take over a new restaurant. But thank you so much. And they ended up offering that position to my husband, which he has worked equally as hard, equally as long for. So it stayed in the family, and he's now the general manager of that location, and has done an incredible job. And then shortly after that, I was offered a position to work at the corporate level. And it's still at that same pay level, and the hours are, I can pick my kid up from daycare, and I can be home to cook dinner, and I can be a lot more active in AA and in this program, and things that I wasn't able to do working the way I was working. If that's not God, it's like I would have never chosen that chain of events to happen. Usually it takes a lot longer to see what God's plan is in everything. This was a quick turnaround, and it was pretty obvious that God knew what was best in that situation. I would like to say that was enough to and don't get me wrong, I wasn't bought out at any point in time, but I do not work this program perfectly. Sometimes I work it just enough to hold on. And while I was pregnant with Brady, my meeting attendance went way down. As a new mom, first couple months of his life, meeting attendance was like once every couple weeks maybe. And I will tell you, I was batshit. I mean, just nuts. Really, truly crazy. And I remember coming home one day, he had forgot to put down the dog puppy pads, and I had an older dog, and she peed all over the floor, and I came home and there was pee on the floor, and no one else was home, and I raged out. I took my shoes off and I threw them at the walls, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs, hitting things, punching things, yelling that he's just an incompetent human being, and he's the best. And I knew I was crazy. I knew I sounded crazy. I felt crazy. I felt out of control. And I knew it was alcoholism just running rampant. I could identify that. And I also remember thinking to myself, man, if I feel this way for too much longer, I'm gonna do something to change the way I feel. I know it, because I cannot stand the way I feel. I cannot stand to be in my own skin right now. I gotta get out of here, and I just keep, wherever I go, I'm there, and I can't escape it, and I gotta change the way I feel. And I know one of two ways of doing that. Get drunk or loaded, or show back up to AA. And thank God, I made the second choice, and I plugged back in harder than I, probably ever had before. And I committed to going to meetings, and I started working steps again, and I built up some good resentments during that time, and started working with a sponsor again, and doing all the things that I knew to do. And this past year has been, I've felt and known a peace that I never knew before. I have a level of serenity and acceptance that I heard about but I'd never experienced. I have a different level of love for you guys, a genuine care for the people in these rooms, whether I know you, directly or indirectly. I care. I really do. I used to kind of say that and not really mean it with every fiber, but I mean it now. And I mean it when I say I'm grateful. I'm the best version of myself when I'm plugged into this program. And it was said at a meeting, I think it may have been Danny, but he said, you're either, are you at AA or are you in AA? And that it struck a chord with me, because for so long I had just been at AA. I had just come to meetings. I had just done enough to stay sober. But I wasn't in AA. I wasn't a part of. And this disease is so good at keeping us apart from. And that part of the disease was still running my life. And today I try really hard to be a part of, and I feel a part of. And that's so big for me. And I just, I don't live scared today of going back out there, but I think I have a healthy, real fear of what is on the other side, and what can happen, and what will happen if I don't do these things. And I just, today I love the person I am, and I'm not perfect, and I still pick it at myself, but I can look in the mirror today and I'm proud of who I am, and that's because of you guys and because of this program and because of God. So that's all I got. Thank y'all so much for being here tonight and hearing my story, and I love y'all. So.